So a couple weeks ago, there was like this really odd promotional art that was released with Shonen Jump, and it showed us Izuku taking on All For One. So this promo art here is interesting for many reasons, and one of them is like the timing of it, because this exchange here hasn't happened in the manga. But considering what's going on and what has happened, it seems like this is an inevitability at this point, I guess. And that's odd, because that would make this like a full-blown spoiler, and that's not typical with Jump. I mean, it's not unheard of, but just things like this don't normally happen, you know what I mean? So let me break down why this image is important and what it possibly tells us about the future of the story. So we're gonna have to go back to chapter 357, because I think that's actually the last time that we see both of these characters. So in that chapter, we saw the continuation of Endeavor fighting against All For One, and Endeavor was like really taking it to him at this point. And after like an extended beatdown of fire and whatnot, he eventually, I guess, prominence burns him like while holding on to him. But it is mentioned in the chapter that he was waiting for like a special point to do it. So I guess this was it. Hey, also guys, if you like my Hero content, please subscribe if you haven't already. It's fine if you don't want to, but if you just needed a reminder, here you go. Thanks. And he winds up just burning All For One to like char. And it's mentioned that he doesn't have hyper regeneration. That's important going forward. And at this point, we assume that All For One has pretty much been defeated. But no, of course, it's never that easy. And suddenly he starts talking again. And he says, "Did you really think I'd casually saunter up to the big finale empty-handed? This body had already served its purpose, and it was destined for the scrap heap anyway. So why not try this out?" And after he says that, we see Eri and the quirk destroying bullet with her. Then suddenly All For One's eye and ear start to grow back. And he says heroes don't have a monopoly on big sacrificial moments, you know. Villains are also scariest when wounded. And then after that, we cut to Izuku, who's still on his way flying to UA. And suddenly the vestige of Yoichi appears. It says, "Midoriya, I've got a bad feeling about this." And then in the distance, we see something coming towards Izuku. There's no way to make out what this is. And that's where the chapter ended. And like I said before, that's pretty much the last time that we saw Izuku and All For One. And that brings me to this promotional art here, where we see Izuku facing off against All For One. And I guess that means that this happens afterwards. Like, it's All For One that is on his way to encounter Izuku. And if that is true, then I guess that means that like the worst case scenario here came to fruition. So when this originally happened, we speculated that All For One may have some way or another gotten Eri's quirk, or like a variant of it, because clearly she's pictured here after he says, "Why not try this out?" as well as with the quirk destroying bullet. Hey, but real quick guys, I just want to talk about Gamer Supps for a second, because I'm a big fan of this stuff. They actually just dropped a new flavor called Kaho's Guilty Pleasure, which is basically just a green tea flavor, and it's also in collaboration with Kaho Shibuya. But I've also been drinking peach tea and strawberry lemonade, and this stuff just makes working so much easier. Like, I've been drinking this stuff instead of coffee, and I just love it so much. So if you're interested in getting some Gamer Supps of your own, check out the link in the description, or just use code BIGZ on the Gamer Supps website. Thanks guys. Now we know that the League of Villains were in possession of the quirk destroying bullets because Shigaraki stole them from Overhaul and gave them to Yujiko. And to be honest, we didn't really see much come of them. I mean, we saw Shigaraki use them in the previous war, mainly against Aizawa, but outside of that, we never really saw what else was done with them. But I guess this implies that Yujiko, before he was arrested, which he has been for a while now, since the previous war, he somehow synthesized it, or reverse engineered it, or extracted like the quirk factor, or whatever was in there, and somehow derived like a quirk or something, and gave it to All For One. Now, I doubt that this is like literally Eri's rewind quirk, because if it was, it would just be a little too absurd for All For One to have that ability right now, and I think the circumstances would have been much different if he did. But like I mentioned, it's probably like a variant or something like that, as to where like it has some properties of Eri's rewind quirk, but it's not like literally it. And if that is the case, then that explains what we're seeing here with All For One like growing his eye and ear back, because, you know, as we know, All For One has like a potato face, courtesy of like All Might completely destroying him in their big epic fight that they had 6 years ago. And as I also said, it's mentioned in 357 that All For One doesn't have hyper regeneration. And even if he did, he wouldn't just suddenly grow back an eye and an ear that he hasn't had for many years. Or at least that's kind of like how regeneration had been working throughout the series up until this point. So the only thing that would really be able to do something like this would be like Eri's quirk. But also the fact that he says that this body had already served its purpose and it was destined for the scrap heap anyway. Why not try this out? I guess this means that it's not completely stable and there's a possibility it may not completely work or something, or it may just like kill him accidentally if he uses it, because obviously that's, you know, something Eri is very capable of. I mean, we saw that she accidentally killed her own father with it. So there's clearly some kind of dynamic to it that's not completely viable, which I guess led it to being like his last resort here. And going back to the promotional art, I guess that means that it was like very successful, because we see like All For One have like his full face here, even his hair is back. Now there's like another odd thing that's going on in this picture, and I'm not entirely sure what to make of it, because like part of his face is clearly black here. So is this like some kind of mask he's wearing, or is this just like a hard shadow casted on his face just for the sake of this image? And that's kind of been part of the course with All For One. Whenever we saw him in like a flashback or something, never full on saw his face. I mean, it's always kind of been obstructed in one way or another. And part of me thinks like, oh, All For One doesn't have to have like a full on clear view of his face. Maybe obstructing it can always make him a little ambiguous, since, you know, he's kind of like the personification of evil, more or less. Then there's another part of me that thinks like maybe there's a reason why Horikoshi doesn't want to show us his full face, because he maybe looks like someone. And yeah, you know where this is going. There's a possibility that All For One is Izuku's father, and I'm not saying that it's guaranteed, but it's definitely like a real possibility at this point. But if this actually does happen here and Izuku does wind up encountering All For One, I'm very curious to see how he's going to react to seeing like his full appearance, which I guess he hasn't fully seen yet. Even when he went into the Vestige World flashbacks, I guess he was seeing what the audience was seeing, right? Which was like an obstructed face. But whether he is Izuku's father or not, this ultimately means that All For One, I guess, wound up just defeating Endeavor and everyone else there and kind of just left. So that's also something to kind of look forward to. I mean, I hope he didn't kill them, because man, that would be pretty tragic. Then again, we kind of just did lose Bakugo, kind of. Verdict's still out on that. But yeah, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Where do you think this is headed? And if you liked the video, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.